Hello there and welcome to the Meaningful Stitch. This is another special episode, not like my usual. This is actually going to be the Shawl Wall Part 2. So if you have not yet seen the Shawl Wall Part 1, you might want to go and visit that, and I'll leave a link in the description box. Also in the description box you will find a link to a page on Patreon, which is free to access for everybody, and that will contain all the details about the shawls and the yarns, or as much as I can remember anyway, along with photographs, so you'll be able to see all of these shawls in a little bit more close-up detail. So, as I had mentioned in the Shawl Wall Part 1, we had a joiner come recently and fix a hollow aluminium tube horizontally across our bedroom wall. It looks a little bit, I suppose, like a ballet bar, but set much higher up. And basically what I'm doing is I'm draping my shawls over the bar. And so they're not pulling, there's no, I don't have any concern about them snagging or anything like that. It's just really an opportunity for me to display them in a way that I can then see them and choose to wear them on a more regular basis, rather than having them all in boxes underneath my bed. Not terribly accessible, I can tell you. So this is much better. So I had realised after I did the Shawl Wall Part 1 that I probably had more shawls to talk about. And I started counting them up in my head, and I got to about 13 or 14, and I thought, oh goodness me, I've probably got enough to do a Shawl Wall Part 2. So I spent some time this afternoon pulling out the shawls from underneath the bed that I hadn't pulled out before, and realised that I had exactly the same number as I had in the Shawl Wall Part 1. So that's 17 shawls in Shawl Wall Part 1 and 17 shawls for Shawl Wall Part 2. Now in this selection that I'm going to share with you, there are a few more gifted shawls, so I haven't knit all of these. In the previous episode I shared that I think there was just one that I hadn't knitted, and that was my grandma's shawl, but I think there are 4 in this selection here that I haven't knitted, so I don't have as much information on those as perhaps the other ones, but I will do my best. I did do some sleuthing before I came on to talk to you, so we'll see how I go, but the one I'm going to start with is actually the one I have the least information on, so trust me, I have a lot more information moving forward. Basically, I have hung these up in kind of like a rainbow order, but we start with black, so I'm just going to reach back and I'm just going to go through each one of these shawls one by one and share as much as I know about each one of them. So the first one is all the way over here, and it is a linen shawl. I'm pretty sure it's Kalinka, and I'm saying pretty sure because this is one of the ones that was knitted for me. The lovely Jess of Ginger Twist knitted this for my 40th birthday. So I know that must have been 2018. So I know when it was knitted and I know what it's knitted with, but what I can't tell you is what the design is, unfortunately. I will ask Jess actually and see if she can remember, and if so, I will update that information in the post that accompanies this episode. But I love this shawl. It's actually quite a revelation because it is incredibly soft, and if you've ever knitted with linen, you will know that it's not terribly soft to knit with. It's can be a bit harsh. But once it's knitted up and once it's washed, it just softens and softens and softens, and it softens up even more over time. So this is actually a very soft shawl, and it's a great summer piece. So I would wear it over my shoulders because I burn terribly in the hot sun. Well, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the hot sun. I am Scottish after all. I will burn just by looking at the sun. But yes, it serves to do a little bit of a cover up if I start to feel my skin starting to burn. But also if it gets a little bit cooler. It's a very lightweight shawl. I think maybe it might just be the one skein actually. Another way to wear it is by kind of pulling it up and round and wearing it like this. So it's a lovely, lightweight, beautiful shawl, and like I said, I will attempt to find out the name of the designer, and once I find that out, I will update. So that's the first shawl. From now on I can tell you a little bit more about all the rest, I think. This next one is the Fleur. This is a DK weight shawl that I have knitted up in Drops Alpaca DK, and this is their natural black. So I'll hold it up a little bit so you can see that actually it's not black, it's like a very dark espresso brown, like a bitter chocolate. And the contrast is actually two different shades of pink mohair that I've held together, and those are Drops Kid Silk mohair. It's a triangular shape. It's very easy to wear. These bobbles were super fun to do, and it's definitely one of my warmer shawls because it is DK alpaca, and alpaca is already pretty warm. Add in that it's got some mohair in it. It is a heavier weight warm shawl. It is a particularly beautiful warm sunny day in Edinburgh today. It's the end of March, so that's not entirely usual, I would say, for our springtime, but it is really warm. But it's supposed to be getting really cold again towards the end of next week. So I'll probably be very glad of some of these more woolier and warmer shawls. So this is the Fleur. It's a pattern, it's a free pattern designed by Espace Tricot. Well, it's available through Espace Tricot, but I think it was actually designed by the previous owners. But it's still available as a free pattern on the Espace Tricot Ravelry page, which of course I will leave links to in the post that I've linked in the description box. I think I actually paid for this pattern originally because I think they were doing it as a fundraiser. So, and the money was going to charity, but I do think it is now a free pattern. They have actually brought out, I think, another two. I think they've brought out another two variations of the Fleur. One which is a one colour 4-ply version, which has slightly smaller bobbles. And then I think the third version was, I think it was, again, it's a DK weight, but it uses the smaller bobbles. So if you don't like the size of the bobbles, there are other versions out there. But I do like a bobble. I really like the colours in this. I think it's really dramatic. I like the two-tone pink. The reason why I did the two-tone pink, and this is what happens, isn't it, when we buy online sometimes, is the colour doesn't always get represented very clearly on the screen. And so when the mohair arrived, it wasn't quite the shade that I had expected it to be. But by mixing the two together, I got a little bit closer to the shade that I wanted. Top tip, when buying yarn online, make sure that you don't have the brightness turned down on your screen. I do that all the time. Particularly, I think it's like a battery saving, isn't it? And then the dimness on the brightness on the screen gets dimmed, and so that means that colours really aren't represented very clearly, and that makes it slightly harder, I think, to get a more accurate representation of your colour choice. But there we go. This is the Fleur, and it's a free pattern on Espace Tricot. Okay, next one. Oh, okay, so this next one, I'm going to pull this down and the next one's going to fall. This next one is the very first one that I knitted, and this is the Snow Melt, and it is by Helen Stewart, and it's knitted in Malabrigo. I cannot remember the colourways because it was a very long time ago. I actually remember knitting this while watching the Six Nations rugby on TV, so it must have been in February, March of 2015, 2016. It was a mystery knit along, so the individual parts were revealed as you went along. It was the first time I'd ever knitted a shawl, and it was the first time I'd ever participated in a mystery knit along. And obviously I really enjoyed both because I was hooked. This is not the first mystery knit along that you shall see as we move along here. So this is the snow melt. It uses 3 skeins of 4 ply, so around about 400 meters of each. It was a lot of fun to do. It was the first time I learned about things like I-cord edging. It was really a lot of fun. There's there's a lot of garter in there, a bit of lace, and a really lovely edging. It is a semi-circular shawl. So this was, as I said, this is the very first one that I knitted. So it was also an experience to learn how a semicircular shawl was constructed. So yeah, I'll show you it on. So this is, as you can see, like some of these earlier shawls are quite a bit smaller than the shawls that I've ended up knitting more recently. But I do still really like this one. I think it is still very pretty, and it's still lovely colours. It's maybe not so much my style anymore, but I will certainly be hanging on to it because it started an obsession. What can I say? So there we go. That's the Snow Melt by Helen Stewart. The next one, I am racking my brains to try and remember what the name of this shawl is, and I can't remember, so it'll be popped down on the screen just now so you'll be able to see what it's called. It came out in the first shawl collection, also by Helen Stewart, and it is a crescent shaped shawl. I knitted it in Ginger Twist Lallybroch. This is the colour Lallybroch. And it is the merino silk lace base that Jess does at Ginger Twist. Now it's like got a garter section at the beginning, and then you move into what is actually beaded lace. So this was the first time that I learned how to knit with beads. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot easier than I expected. I have a very tiny crochet hook where I would take the stitch, the one that I wanted to place the bead on, I would take that off the needle using my crochet hook and slip on a bead, and then I'd put the stitch back onto the needle and then knit the stitch. It is that simple. It is not a complicated thing. You just need to be aware of which stitches you're adding your bead to. But it creates a lovely weight, and also because it's a crescent, it just, look at that curl. Isn't that gorgeous? Of course, because it's got this lovely silk content in it, it drapes really beautifully. I'll show you what it looks like. Again, this was an earlier shawl, so it is one of my smaller ones. Not the massive schlankets that I've been knitting more recently. But again, it's actually really nice to have these smaller shawls, particularly for the summertime. You know, you don't really want a massive heavy shawl during the summer. You want something a little bit lighter weight, but will still give you a little bit of warmth if somebody's got the air conditioning blasting in the car or or whatever. So the thing I love about Helen Stewart's patterns is that each row is written out in a spreadsheet. So it makes it really easy to keep track. This was not a particularly easy lace weight pattern. I seem to remember that there was lace on both sides, so the wrong side and the right side. Normally lace will just have all your lace patternings will be on your right side, your lace stitches, and then on the back you'll just knit, but that was not the case with this one. So it really did require you to kind of keep track of that, but the way that Helen Stewart writes out her patterns makes that much more easy to do. The other thing is that she uses a percentage system, So you can actually see how much yarn your each section will take. So she'll tell you, you know, you should have used up 5% of your yarn at this point, or 10%, or so you can actually see whether you're going to have enough yarn to finish your project. So it kind of eliminates the risk of yarn chicken. And it also means that if you want to, I suppose, if you wanted to, you could actually do some stash diving and scrap busting. and that percentage system would really help you out with that. So there we go. This is a shawl I can't remember the name of, but it is by Helen Stewart, and it's in Ginger Twist Merino Silk Lace Suite. And I will share what the pattern name is because it's gone completely out of my head. There we go. The next one, I do remember the name of this one. This one was actually another mystery knit along. This was one of Romy Hill's mystery knit alongs, and gosh, this must be again 2017, maybe 2016, 2017. This is Beautiful Together, and I have never knitted a shawl quite like this one, and I had never knitted one at that point. I've never knitted one again, so that's not because it isn't beautiful. Sorry, I'm blowing out here. It's not because it's not beautiful. It was just because it was such a surprise and such a stretch of my my knitting ability at the time. So again, it is another semicircular shawl. It's knitted in with 2 skeins of 4-ply. I bought this yarn at Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and it is Old Maiden Ant, and I know this colour is called Gothic. I think this colour is called Last Night's Red Dress. I think. I could be wrong. But the thing that really tested me with this particular shawl is that it has lace short rows in it, because you'll see this side here is a lot more stitches than this side, or a lot more rows, sorry, than this side. And that's because it's kind of created with short row shaping. And again, with the next lace insert down, it's also more short row lace. I'd never done short row lace before when I got the pattern, or that section of the pattern, because it was a mystery knit along, and that means that it's given to you in sections. So you only know kind of what yarn to get. You don't know what the pattern's actually going to end up looking like. And then the individual parts of the pattern are delivered to you on a week by week basis. And I remember when I got this pattern for this, the section for this part here, reading through the pattern, and I could not make sense of it to save myself. And it's not because it's a badly written pattern, it's a brilliantly written pattern. It was so out of the box, and because I didn't have a sense of what the look I was going for, I really struggled to figure out that actually what I was creating was short row lace. But I think it's incredibly beautiful. The other feature of this shawl is this incredible bind off. Oh dear, I'm blowing out. It's because it's so dark. This incredible bind off, which was really complicated and took a lot of knitting, and was a lot of effort to block out, because I pinned each section. And it's actually held up pretty well, because I've not reblocked it since I did that. And that was a while ago. So again, it's a smaller shawl because it's just the 2 skeins of fingering weight. But I think it's a really lovely one. Again, it's a little bit lacier, I think, than the style that I generally go for now. But you can see the lace edging there, and this big short row lace wedge here. So yes, it was a lot of fun. Romy's patterns, like I say, are beautifully written. Her mystery knit-alongs have a wonderful Ravelry group. Everybody is incredibly friendly and very helpful. So if you do have an issue, if you do get stuck, then it's a really good place to go and get unstuck. The other thing I would say about mystery knit-alongs in general, actually, is that they're a very good way to learn a new technique, because there's a lot of hand-holding with mystery knit-along, unlike perhaps some of the other shawls when you just download the pattern. You know, certainly designers offer pattern support, but with a mystery knit-along, when you've got a group of people who are all moving through the project together, then there's a lot of community support, and there's sometimes videos, or there's sometimes additional information, or I just feel as though if there's something that you want to learn, sometimes that'll be flagged up in the mystery knit-along description, and you can go, well, like, I've never done short row lace before, and I would like to give that a go, so I'll sign up for this mystery knit-along. Or in a later shawl I'm going to show you, I also did a mystery knit-along to learn mosaic knitting, because I knew I was going to get that additional support. The Stephen West mystery knit-alongs, which I shared in the first shawl wall episode, they also have a huge amount of information and additional support. So don't shy away from a mystery knit-along just because you don't know what it's going to look like. A lot of a shawl, a lot of the way a shawl will look in the end actually comes down to your choice of yarn and your colours. And you can certainly go more neutral, you can go a safer route, and still end up with something that you will absolutely love. But in this case, I've just basically chosen a variegated red and a tonal red. So that was not a difficult pairing to put together, and I knew that no matter where the pattern went, that these two would look lovely together and would create a very wearable accessory. Okay, so that was Beautiful Together by Romy Hill. The next one I have for you here is designed by a friend of mine who goes to our local knit night, and she's a new designer. She's called Spirit Bridger, and this is the Incantation shawl. Now, I knitted a much bigger version than her original pattern, and I will show you, going from the more dainty shawls to a significantly larger, cozier shawl. But here we are. This is Drops Alpaca DK in the natural cream and in that natural espresso brown that I showed you before. And this here is also Drops Alpaca DK, but I have hand dyed to create this dark red rusty colour for this lace section. As I said, Spirit is a relatively new designer, but she has a few patterns up already. You will find a link to her Ravelry in the post that accompanies. And she has a new shawl pattern out called the Overmorrow shawl, which is absolutely beautiful. And I've seen a couple of people who are test knitting those, so I've seen early examples of that shawl, and it looks really beautiful. So something to look out for. I've added these these tassels to my shawl. I've added 3 of them just at either points of the triangle. Oh, there we go. And these are a lot of fun. I think I would probably do them. In fact, I have done tassels slightly differently, so they're not so colour blocked. I've been a little bit more subtle with my tassels. I think the next time I did fringing or anything like that was when I added a fringe to my shawlography, which you can see in the first special episode. But everything's a learning curve, right? But this is a lovely shawl, and like I said, it's a great big one. The pattern was, I just adapted the pattern to add in more sections and work the numbers, and yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think it's a beautiful cozy shawl, and like I said, you should go check her out on Ravelry and check out her new shawl pattern, Overmorrow. Okay, so that's the Incantation shawl by Spirit Bridger in Drops DK Alpaca, 2 natural shades and my own hand dyed. I should say I remember dyeing that alpaca, and it was really difficult because alpaca does not take the dye in the same way as perhaps merino or wool does. Actually, it's a completely different animal fiber, and so it was harder to get a color, like a proper vibrant color, like I wanted. I did eventually get there, but it was a bit of trial and effort. I have so much respect for yarn dyers and for designers, because they just put in so much work. And yes, this shawl, I think, is a good example of the effort that goes into designing a shawl and the effort that goes into dyeing the yarn. Okay, so that's the Incantation. Next up, oh, here we go. Oh, try not to pull down two shawls at once. This is the Time Trades shawl, and it is by Caitlin Hunter, who goes by Boyland Knitworks. I have knitted this up in 2 shades of speckled single ply merino by Mon Sheep Shop, who is a French hand dyer, and in a gradient set of Manos del Uruguay merino silk. So from what I can remember, you start here. This was a while ago. I actually knitted this on holiday in France, and so I got to block it outside and let it dry in the sun. How lovely. That's not something I generally get to do in Scotland. But here it is. It's a wrap that is knitted on the bias. So we've got all of these lace and textural details and garter on a slant, and it's super lovely. So you've got all of your gradient on one end, and then you move into 2 skeins of a, well, I've chosen certainly a more neutral palette here. I've knitted this pattern, I think, twice. I think I also knitted it for a friend, and I did it in shades of blue, and it was in a merino silk, and it was really beautiful as well. But what I would say is that I think knitting this shawl shape is probably my least favourite. I like a shawl where you start off with a small number of stitches and end up with a lot, rather than the other way around, or rather than a consistent number the whole way through, because I suppose that just ends up feeling like you're knitting a scarf, and I'm not sure there's anything more boring to knit than a scarf. But there was plenty in this to keep me interested, because like you see, there's this garter, there's the lace, and certainly moving through these beautiful Manos del Uruguay colours was just so fun and so delightful. I thought it worked out really well. So there we go. This is the Time Trades shawl by Caitlin Hunter in Manos del Uruguay and Mon Sheep Shop. There you go. Next one. Oh, we finally got to a Stephen West. You'll get that joke if you've seen the first shawl wall. This is the Painting Bricks shawl. I knitted this, I think this is one of the first things that I knitted in the lockdown in 2020. And it brought me a lot of comfort and a lot of, just a lot of comfort. I just felt it really, it created a soft place to land when everything seemed so incredibly uncertain at the time. I knitted this up using Malabrigo single ply merino, and I think it's called Machita, and this is in the colour Sandbar, so it's a very kind of neutral, sort of warm grey, I suppose. And the colour contrast is brushed alpaca silk, and it's in a variety of different colours. So I think I've got curry, Bordeaux, pink sand, pale rust and rust. How impressed am I that I remembered that? I think I just chose the colours pretty randomly. I don't think I chose them with a great deal of intention. Just going with the ones that I wanted to knit next. It is a elongated semicircular shawl, so it works along some of the principles of a semicircular shawl whilst continuing increases at the ends. He encouraged you, I think this is the first time I really saw him speaking about the weave and steven technique, which was to weave your ends in as you went, and I think that sped things up towards the end significantly. It's a great big warm hug of a shawl. There we go. And actually after I knitted this one, I knitted another one for my lovely friend Jen, and I knitted that in the undyed Yakety Yak from Ginger Twist, which I think I showed you last time on the Isles of Purbeck, Tales of the Isles of Purbeck shawl. So that was the framing colour, which is this beautiful sort of bronze, and I used black mohair for the bricks. So it created like this monochrome shawl, and it worked out really beautifully as well. I also know that Millie of Tribe Yarns did a version with some sparkle yarn, and it looks completely ethereal and spectacular. So you might want to go and check out Millie's painting bricks as well if you like this particular design, to see a few variations, a few options. But like I said, this was a shawl that I knitted early on in lockdown. It's a big fluffy comforting hug of a shawl, and I love it very much. So I love the colours of it. They're very warm. So painting bricks, Stephen West. Next one. This is the Corella, and it is by Julie Knits in Paris, who is Julie Dubrow. This is also in Malabrigo, but this is in their merino lace, which is a single ply lace weight, and it's teamed up with some drops kid silk. And I know this colour is called, I think it's called Soft Apricot, and I think the dark brown is called Cognac. And I think the mohair is just called Rust. Again, this is a rectangular wrap. It does actually recommend that you use 4-ply yarn, not lace, so that was a modification on my part. But unlike other wrap styles, it had a very unique and exciting construction. It's actually quite modular, so you knit this section here from here all the way to here with your lace and your slipped stitches, which creates this really cool design. And then you pick up along the edge and you knit some brioche lace, which I've used the soft apricot shade with the mohair held on the other side. That's what it looks like on the wrong side. It's on the right side. I really like these. For some reason they remind me of persimmons. And then once you've done that, you pick up your stitches along the edges and you create this eyelet pattern using just one of your contrasting colour. And you do the same, pick up your stitches at the other end and you do the same there, and then you pick up your stitches along the edge and knit an edging again. So it was a really interesting modular knit that showcased one of my favourite brioche lace stitches. It is very easy to wear. It's pretty much, like I said, with wraps, you pretty much wear them as like a scarf. Just like this. And of course, depending on which way around, you can showcase a different part of the knit. But there we go. Isn't that beautiful? I really like Julie's brioche patterns. I think she's always doing really interesting things. She's absolutely a designer, I think, to keep an eye out on, because like I said, I think she's very, very clever. In fact, I went to the Perth Festival of Yarn back in 2019, and I went to a class with Julie Dubrow, and it was fixing brioche mistakes. And she was not only a wonderful designer or is a wonderful designer, but she's also a brilliant knitwear teacher. Very patient, very kind, very engaging, and structured her class really well and took us through the whole process. So I was really very impressed with her. And yes, this is one of the shawls. So this is the Corella by Julie Dubrow in Malabrigo lace and drops mohair silk. Okay, I seem to be getting through these a little bit faster than I did in the first shawl wall. I can't tell you a huge amount about the next three, because the next three were gifted. So this is the Coth Biro, which is a pattern by Stella Egidi. It also has the most fabulous tassels. Now, this is a triangular shawl. It's got some really interesting details. It's got these beautiful bobbles, and then some slip stitches, and these kind of horizontally slipped stitches. And then a little bit of texture here. So it's a lovely shawl. I don't know the yarn composition. I do know that it was naturally dyed. And I know that the yarn dyer did a trunk show at My Little My, which is the local yarn shop in Cognac, but I can't remember the name. But it is quite a rustic yarn, but it's I really love this. I think it looks amazing, and I think the tassels that my mum added just really make it. I love a tassel. So yes, this is the Coth Biro, and it was a gifted knit by my mum. So she clearly knows the colours I like, hey? So the next shawl is another shawl that my mum gifted me. And this is The Rain Outside. I always get that wrong. It's called The Rain Outside, and it is by Sylvia McFadden, who is Soft Sweater, I think, on Instagram and on Ravelry. I'm pretty sure that this yarn is Isère Spinny, and because it's the same colour, but it's been dyed on two different bases, so one's dyed on grey and one's dyed on white. I think that's right. Could be wrong. My mum might correct me. So, and it's got this little accent here, which is it was a merino single ply, and I think it was a mini skein from La Bien-Aimée. I think it's called the Red Shoes. The Ruby Slippers? Ruby Slippers. I think that's what it was called. So the thing that really is fantastic about this particular design is these lace inserts, which again are done through short row shaping. So it kind of pushes the fabric up and down to create these beautiful little shaped lozenges almost, which are very unusual. Sylvia McFadden did, I think, a whole collection that kind of focused. One was called After the Rain. I think one was Waiting for Rain. This is The Rain Outside. and I think there is some other ones as well. And she, along with the collection, she included a template to design your own, so that you could choose what kind of lace you wanted to insert, and she showed you the process of how to do that and how to design your own, which I think is an incredibly generous thing for a designer to do, and I really appreciated that. This is a long, shallow crescent, so you can see that it's doing this wonderful spirally thing that crescent shawls do. It's got a little bit of a lace edging here, so and you can see it's been blocked out to little points. I love this one because it is a woolier wool. It's, even although it's it's a shallow shawl, it's really warm, so it's not like a lot of fabric, but it keeps you really warm, and I think that's because it is this woolly wool. I find that the more rustic yarns, and certainly it's not uncomfortable against my skin in any way, but I do think the more rustic yarns that have not been treated with superwash, I think, I love a single ply merino, but it doesn't necessarily keep me very warm. But this absolutely does. So this is one of my warmer weather shawls, even although it's got somewhat less fabric than some of my massive schlankets do. So there we go. That's outside. No, the rain outside. I keep wanting to say outside the rain. Take these words and rearrange them into whatever title makes sense to you. So it's called The Rain Outside, and it's by Sylvia McFadden, and it was knitted for me by my mum. And I'm pretty sure it's Isère yarn, and it's their spinny base. Okay, next one, I also didn't knit. Although interestingly, when I was knitting the Beautiful Together shawl with those short row lace wedges, I remember that my friend Jen was knitting this. This is the Briochelicious, and it's knitted up in Drops Alpaca. They're 4-ply. It's got these 3 bands of 3 colours where the brioche comes in, and then it's got these bands of garter. I'm getting itchy nose. Now, it's a very long crescent-shaped shawl, which I really enjoy wearing. I will show you what it looks like on. Something very pleasing about this particular shawl for me is that this colour here that Jen chose, I have knitted a flax light in this colour, and I improvised the lace panels down either sleeve. So this is an example of a shawl that goes very well with another item in my wardrobe, but it is also beautiful with denim, lovely with like a creamy coloured tea, or something that picks out this gorgeous yellow. So yes, she was knitting on it at the same time as I was working on those short row wedges, which is also possibly why I wasn't getting on very well with the pattern, because when Jen and I get together we do a lot of blethering, and that's not terribly conducive to figuring a pattern out. But I do remember is that we had met up to go to a knitting meetup, and there was some kind of confusion, and we got seated in a different part of the cafe from the rest of the knitters, and so we thought nobody else had turned up, and we only discovered as we were preparing to leave that actually all the knitters were sat in another place in the cafe entirely. So the pair of us just sat and worked on our shawls and drank tea for the majority of our knit gathering experience. And actually Jen then gave this shawl to me on my 40th birthday, when we went away to Shigra together to celebrate my birthday up north. So there we go. This is the Briochelicious. Oh, and it's by Andrea Mowry. And as you know, well, I've just finished an Andrea Mowry shawl, the Cinnabar, and I've just cast on, which I have not shared, extensively, but I have just cast on another Andrea Mowry shawl. So I do love an Andrea Mowry shawl. There's something about her designs which kind of combine the meditative nature of brioche or garter, but mixes things up enough to keep you interested. So they're very engaging knits, but they're also very relaxing, and much better knitting in company than, say, a lace Romy Hill design. As by experience I can tell you. This next one is the Looney shawl, and it's by Natasha Hornby, who goes by Moonstruck Knits. It is this amazing mosaic shawl. It's knitted in Solier and Snaildon yarns. Solier is Norwegian and Snaildon is the Faroe Islands. So again, it's untreated, rustic yarn. I just love this. Every time I put it on, I'm like, why do I not wear this more often? Because, oh my goodness, it's delightful. Well, perhaps not on a day like this when it's particularly warm, because it is a cosy shawl. But this yarn, the reason why I knitted this actually, setting aside the fact that it is an incredibly beautiful pattern, is that my friend Jackie of Caddy Jack's Knits got in touch with me, and I would say this is very early on in our friendship actually, and said that she had knitted this and she had probably roughly enough to make another one. I would just need to get a skein, I think, of the white, this neutral one here. And I'm pretty sure this neutral one is Snaildon, and we actually have a stockist of Snaildon quite close by, which is Midwinter Yarns. And so I was able to get that skein, no worries, and Jackie sent to me her leftovers, which means that our shawls have used the same yarn, which is lovely. Like I said, this is an incredible knit. It was fun, it was engaging, and it's created a really, strong, effective design. The mosaic looks almost woven, like a woven fabric. It was also a really interesting construction, because basically you start at one end, this end here, and you create a shallow triangle. So basically anything above this dotted line here, you create this shallow triangle, get into the center, and then you're decreasing again. And this is created with, got these sort of textured star pattern and these bands of mosaic. It was quite easy to lose track of your stitch count doing these, doing that particular textured pattern, but then of course you had to be bang on your stitch count for your mosaic. So that caused, I think I had to rip out sometimes, and which was annoying, but that was my own silly fault, not the pattern. And then you pick up your stitches, and I will show you my stitch pickup here. This bit along here. You pick up your stitches, and then you knit this incredibly beautiful broad band of texture and then mosaic before adding your tassels. This must be the tassel episode of the Shawl Wall. But there we go. It's like I said, it's an incredibly beautiful pattern. I think this was one of the earlier shawl patterns that Natasha brought out. She has since brought out many beautiful patterns. I have quite a few of them in my library. I think this is still to date the only one that I have knitted, but I absolutely have intentions to knit. I think it's called the Mare shawl, and there's another one as well, the Anthe shawl, which I really like too. And I think she's done, is it the Corbus? Came out quite recently, which is an all over texture one colour shawl, which I really like the look of as well. So yes, there will be more Natasha Hornby shawls in my future because they are so much fun and so effective, and they are a little bit more challenging, and I do appreciate a challenging knit. It's not always what I'm looking for. I like to have maybe one challenging knit on the needles and one easy knit on the needles, because obviously you don't really want a challenging knit while you're sitting watching the television, or you're at knit night, or you know, or it's first thing in the morning. You just want something gentle and easy. But then there are times when a more complex pattern is really what you need, and allows you to stop thinking. Well, this is what it does for me anyway. It stops me thinking or spiraling into anxious thoughts, and it forces me to focus on something other and to enter into the flow of my knitting. And sometimes if my knitting is very simple, then it won't allow me to do that, because my thoughts will continue, because I'm not being distracted. And I think Natasha Hornby knits have that level of complexity. They are also got a lot of drama to them, and they would certainly serve as adequate distraction. So there we go. That's the Looney shawl by Natasha Hornby. This next one is a Stephen West, although if you remember my purl break that I shared in the previous episode, you will know that I'm not averse to an improvised border on a Stephen West shawl, and that's exactly what I've done with this one. This yarn is Dreaming in Colour Lace by Jilly Yarns, I think. And it's in a kind of a variegated shade. It's this one here. It's going, you can see the rib. And on the reverse, I've got different colours of Quince & Co. Piper, which again is a lace weight single ply. And this is the Clockwork in Brioche, which is an older Stephen West pattern. As you can see, it is huge. And at a certain point, I must have got bored, because this was done a long time ago, but I added on a completely different border. So I've got sections here which are just stockinette in the variegated lace, and then I've got this stitch here which is called broomstick lace, and I've done it in this kind of maroon shade and like a forest green, sort of a teal, and of course the other shade I had was this dusky pink and the cream. So there we go. That's what I ended up doing with this. What I would say about this shawl, and it's partially because I have improvised a border on it, it is a bit of a strange shape, but once you've actually put it on, it still sits perfectly well. I think there's ways to wear it so you can showcase the border, and I think, you know, if you are tempted to improvise a different border, or improvise something different with a shawl, you know, why not? You know, why not give it a go and see what happens? The worst that's going to happen is you can rip it back out again. You know, but this one I think is effective in some ways. In most ways, it's very, very light because it is lace weight, and it's a little bit fluffy. I think, I'm not sure what blend the Piper is, but it might be merino and mohair or something like that, because it is very fluffy. You can see here. So there we go. That's the Clockwork in Brioche, which is a Stephen West pattern. And I have given it an improvised border with the broomstick lace. There we go. You can see these increases here. I always think increases look very effective with brioche. But yes, gosh, it's a long shawl, hey. From what I remember, you make a very long I cord, and then you pick up stitches along that edge, and that's what you start, and then but you're doing increases on either edge, and you're doing shaping to create. So actually it would probably sit, I'm thinking about it, better as a shawl over your shoulders. There you go. So like I said, I think it's pretty effective. It's very light. This is certainly one of my older pieces, and I don't think it worked out too badly. So there we go. That's the Stephen West Clockwork and Brioche with modified edging in Quince & Co, Piper and Gilly Lace Dream and Colour. The next one is actually, oh. Everything just fell down. Oh, that's okay, because I've only got 2 more after this one to share with you. So this is going to be a slightly shorter episode than the first one. This is well, it never got a name, but actually I was thinking I would call it the Artemis, because this is one I designed myself. Well, quite a long time ago. It was this wonderful variegated yarn, which is called, I think it's called African Expressions Art yarn. And it was this wonderful variegation of light blue, dark blue, and this kind of warm grey. And I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with it, and I wanted to experiment. I decided ultimately to experiment with linen stitch and variegated yarn and eyelets, and actually I think it worked out pretty well. I haven't looked at this for a long time, but actually it's pretty cool. And then I managed to find a West Yorkshire Spinners, I think it's just signature 4-ply. So the blend is not the same from the variegated part to the tonal part, which is a shame. But this section is in arrow lace, and then it's just got a very plain cast off. And I think I probably could block that out much better, and I would block it out better now, knowing what I know now. I would do a better job of that, but yes, it's again, it's like a kind of an elongated crescent shape. I have no notes for this at all. I probably did have notes at some point, but they are long gone. But yeah, it's interesting to remember, you know, that at one point I had a little dabble with designing. I'd actually completely forgotten about this shawl until I went through my collection earlier. So, like I said, with all things, there's things that I like about it and things that I would change if I was to do it now. But yes, I don't know. Maybe I could reverse engineer it and figure out what on earth I did. But I think that would mean I'd be doing a lot of counting. Again, I would say you can see that this design fits in with the kind of knits that I was doing at the time, which was the Snow Melt by Helen Stewart and the Beautiful Together by Romy Hill, you know, so this kind of more complex lace work, and this contrasted with the more simple eyelet. The other thing was I really wasn't sure whether, you know, as a design to release it, I wasn't sure whether people would actually enjoy knitting it because of the amount of linen stitch. So I mean, the linen stitch I think created a beautiful effect. But it was a lot of bringing your yarn backwards and forwards, and I know some people don't like that so much, but it did work out, I think, pretty well. And I think I did make the most out of that beautiful yarn, which I think my mum gave me. So there we go. And yeah, my intention had been to call it the Artemis shawl just because of the arrow lace and Artemis's connection to archery. She is the archeress. So there we go. That's what I can remember. But there we go. I do actually have one of my own designs on my shawl wall, so that's not so bad. The next one is the second to last. This is called Slip, oh I always get this wrong, Slip Stitch Love, I think, by Lisa Hannes. If that's wrong, I will have the correct. So again, it's one of these titles where I remember all of the words, but I don't remember which order they go in. So that gives you a little bit of insight into how my brain works. But this is a great mosaic pattern. It's you start up at the top here and you increase your stitches until you end up with much, much longer rows. This yarn is a sport weight alpaca silk, which I managed to find in the Oxfam charity shop on Morningside Road. It was hand dyed. I think it was Yarn Pony. So I managed to snap that up when I saw it in the charity shop. I am not ashamed to say that actually when I did see it, I was on the floor trying on a pair of shoes and I may have crawled over the floor when I spotted the yarn. Not terribly dignified, but it ultimately resulted in this very elegant shawl. So this was the first time I ever did mosaic knitting, and Lisa Hannes said that she was going to be doing this mystery knit along and it was going to feature mosaic, and I thought, for exactly as I mentioned before, it would be a great way for me to learn this brand new technique to me. And it really was, you know, so it was a lot of fun to do. I chose my colours based on Levi jeans. You know, that lovely denim blue, and then when it wears through into a hole and you've got the individual strands, and then you've got the stitching, the gold stitching, and then you've got the red label. So that was the way I came up with my colour combination. It's interesting, I don't actually knit that many asymmetric triangle shawls, but they do actually sit quite nicely. Kind of they're a bit more sort of, you can put them more off to one side, and actually I think it sits really well. The different mosaic patterns are really very effective. I'm really pleased with my colour choice. I think it worked out really well, and like I said, because it has been influenced by a pair of jeans, it looks great with wearing it with denim things too, so the colour really works. So there we go, that's the Slip Stitch Love by Lisa Hannes. Which brings us to our last shawl. Gosh, this is a much shorter episode, by about 30 minutes I think, partially because I didn't knit all of the shawls. But this, have we saved the best for last? Possibly. Well, certainly saved one of my favourites for last. This is the Point Shawl, and it's another one by Julie Dubrow. So you can see that she used the same lace with the Corella as she had already done with the Point Shawl. And the Point Shawl again is another asymmetric triangle. You start at the bottom here with a I-cord, very short I-cord cast on, not like the long I-cord cast on with the Stephen West, and then the slip stitches and the lace, the same as with the Corella, and then moving into these beautiful brioche lace repeat, which increases at one edge, sorry, you can see that, until you get to this edging here. Now my colour choice here is Delicate Merino by Walk Collection in boho. I wore this at the 2018, maybe 2019 EYF, So that's kind of a ballpark figure for when it was knitted. I had never knitted brioche lace before. My brioche patterns up to that point had been things like the Clockwork in Brioche and the Excuse Me that shawl by Stephen West that I had showed on the previous episode. So I'd never done anything quite as complex as this. It is created with a lot of brioche increases and then left and right leaning and central decreases. So it really stretched me. I'm not afraid to admit. But once you got the handle of it, because you're doing it so much, by the time you get to about here, you really know what it is that you're about. So, which I think is a good way to learn something. The yarn on the other side is a mohair in kind of like a smoky grey colour. I don't know where I got that from. It could be another Drops Kid Silk. Probably is, but it might not be. So the way I wear this shawl, so I take this longer part here, I wrap it around and bring it down, and then I take this part and bring it round like this. So I think it really is a stunning shawl. I'm very pleased with how this one worked out. I think it's very dramatic. I think it's very glamorous, actually, because I think that smoky grey mohair, because of the silk content, creates almost like a metallic look, and then contrasted with this sort of pale gold, delicate merino, the variegations in it. Look at that with the speckles. It was such fun to knit, I have to say. I picked up the delicate merino from May at Be Inspired Fibres over in Marchmont in Edinburgh. I'm not sure, I don't think she's stocked it for a wee while now, but for a while there she had quite a lovely selection of it. So that's where I got that. But this was my first Julie Dubrow pattern. I've since, as I said, knitted the Corella, and I've also knitted the Moonshadow garment, and like I said, she's a brilliant designer. Her patterns are always very clearly written and very interesting constructions and ideas being played through, and yeah, highly recommend this one if you want to learn some brioche lace. Probably not for brioche beginners. You might want to get a beginner pattern under your belt first. Something like the Briochelicious would be a good place to begin, because you've got those sections of brioche 2 colour and then moving back into the garter. So you're getting a bit of a break and then you're revisiting it again. So that would be a really good starter project, I think. That probably more so than the one I started with, which was the Stephen West Excuse Me, because it gets you to start with a brioche tab. And a brioche tab, it was not, if you've never knitted brioche before, was really not an easy place to begin. So so it certainly set up a barrier to beginning, but the Briochelicious would probably be a good place to start. And then from there you could eventually perhaps come on to something like this, like I did. So there we go. That's all the shawls. I'm saying that's all the shawls. It's not all the shawls. So I've just finished a new shawl, which is the Andrea Mowry Cinnabar, which I'll be sharing in the next episode. I have cast on an Andrea Mowry Boho Blush, which I'm just not very far through on it just now, but I'll also share that as my work in progress on the next episode, because I doubt I'll have finished that by then. I also have a Melting Mirage shawl, which again is a semicircular brioche pattern by Stephen West, and that hangs on my living room wall as a wall display. And I also have a Stephen West Quadrangle Spires knitted in some beautiful Solier yarn by Hillesvåg, the mill over in Norway, and that sits draped over my futon in our sunroom. So there are other shawls And this also doesn't include all the shawls that I've knitted and given away. So shawls, shawls, shawls. Yep, who could, they certainly can't fault me for not having enough of them. So so my loves, I will leave that just there. Like I said, if you click on the link in the description box, you'll be taken to a post over on Patreon, and that will list all of the details that I can remember or have managed to find out the answers for each one of these shawls, along with some photographs of each one of them as well. And however, if you cannot find the information there that you're looking for, you could always ask me a question. I might not necessarily know the answer, but I should probably be able to find it out for you. And the next episode of The Meaningful Stitch will be more of a general catch-up one. So back to our more default programme, our more default lineup of what I've been working on, what I've completed, what I've cast on, what I'm dreaming of. But it will also include a little bit about my plans for next Saturday, because next Saturday I'm going to Perth, and they have a Scottish Wool Producers Showcase happening then, and I'm very excited about that. And so I might have a few additions to my stash that I will be touching on in the next episode too. Okay, my darlings, I'll let you go. I'll release you into the rest of your day, and I'll speak to you really soon. Take good care.